Let's go, my Levia fans. Today we're pulling back the curtain a bit and showing you some of the faces of those core cult members of the League of Levia. We've got YZ in from Singapore and PH out of Hong Kong here. Say hello, guys.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Hello.
All right, between them, they each brought Levia to a second place finish this ProQuest season, with xNirvash and myself taking her to another 2 ProQuest top 8s. So across the world, honestly, Levia, most of her representation is right here in this room, and we all played different builds this season. Myself on Club, we've got PH, who was on Hybrid, very cool list, and then we've got YZ, who was on Claws. So we're going to jump in to each deck here and talk about how they felt during this ProQuest season. So let's jump right into the performance that blew us all out of that water. That was YZ on Blood Deck Claws.
So hi everyone, I'm YZ. So I've started playing Flesh and Blood in late October last year to November. So right when Tales of Aria Unlimited got released. So Levia is actually my first deck. It was one of my it was a tough deck to play, to be honest. What gotten me interested in her was that a lot of her attacks very big. Swing for 6, go again. Yep, swing for 9. She was very underrepresented in meta back then, and even now. And so I kind of gravitate towards that kind of decks where no one actually tries to make it play well, except for you, Ethan. Yeah. So so that was what got me with a tough deck.
Yeah, well, you played it really well, and you had that big showing right in the beginning, getting that second place so early on. I saw everyone on Facebook like following around, rooting for the Levia player, and it was you, not me. So that was crazy. So really, congrats, because you took the world by storm on that. So how about just run down a little bit about that tournament and how you got there at that finals?
So for that tournament, if I'm not wrong, it was a 34 or 36 man tournament. I actually got invited to, I got my registration very late, like literally the day before the tournament happened. And then there was an open slot, and so I didn't actually get to really sit down and prepare a list. So I took your list and
Right.
I just went with it. Yeah. So for my Swiss rounds, I've actually faced an OTK Viserai, Rhina Running Club, 2 Chains, another OTK Viserai, and then on the final. And so I went 4-2. My losses were on round 5 and round 6 to OTK Viserai, which was the eventual ProQuest winner as well. And then lost to Star. So in the quarters, I faced the same Stavo I lost in Swiss. Managed to win, but just barely, I felt. And then in semis, I faced another OTK Viserai, and I managed to push enough damage fast enough and to force him to pop off Sonata earlier than he had expected, and I think that netted me the win. Against the finals, another OTK Viserai. I've just watched the replay recently again, and I can't believe it. He popped off on turn 3 against me. There's nothing much.
No. No, there's not. Well, look, once again, you had an amazing run, and it's amazing to hear you took down those decks like Starvo, like Viserai, because for me, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I don't want to play Claws right now. Those matchups feel really hard to beat. So when you showed up there, what matchup were you most afraid of? And I guess on the flip side, what were you most comfortable against?
Going into the tournament, I was most afraid of stuff. But to be honest, coming out of the tournament, I'm most afraid of Viserai now. I think Viserai is OTK Viserai. In fact, is just a straight clock against us, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people talk about Viserai saying that, oh, you should always go tempo because you will out damage and trade the opponent. But yes, that may be true. But I think OTK Viserai really requires us to power on pressure.
Mhm.
If not, we will just die even at 40 health. Yeah.
And Levia
So-
always has the issue there, right, where you're limited to what you draw in terms of pressure hands. Some hands, the best you can do is some hands the best you can do is 6 damage or roll scabs, and feels a little rough when you're facing Viserai, right?
And honestly, the Karen Husk against OTK Viserai is not as effective as Hope. Yeah, when they pop off, they have more than text really go into you. That 6 block is no longer as relevant. Not when there's like 22 or 24 rune chance coming in your face in one go. Yeah,
For sure.
yes. So so I back to the question. Yeah, I was most afraid of Starvo going into the tournament. And that's because Starvo is just like a way tougher Bravo, right? So the old Bravo, we only really had to worry about 3 crippling crushes. We survived the 3, and then we are more or less safe, and we can continue with our game plan. But with Starvo, it is 6. Yeah, so it's crippling crushes and token O's. So yes, I guess how I would think of it is it requires them to draw the absolute like nuts to constantly show you 3 elements and plus guardian attack, which is very crippling, but it doesn't really come up as often as I thought it would. So most of the times against the Starvo, who is a good player, mind you, he can show me a Starvo ability, but just come in with Earth attack, and to me that is just a relief. As long as basically I guess the stars must align for them in order to do a continuous back-to-back attack. But then again, if the stars really do align for them, in my mind, I feel that no deck in our current meta game can actually deal with that.
Right.
So I went with the strategy of raise them. So yeah.
Yep. Well, you did take one down, so well done for the Levia team. So PH, did you have a question?
Yeah, for sure. So, to my knowledge, how like we all played Blood Deck Claws before, and we all understand how much of a high pressure deck it is. Were there many times where you felt that pressure while playing, especially against like decks that have high hit effects, maybe Dorinthias, Starvos, and was there any times that you actually lost yourself due to Blood Deck during the ProQuest season?
Yes. So playing Claws Levia by herself is essentially a race against not just the opponent, plus you also have to race against yourself. So my mental math was always that if I do not throw out more than 10 damage every turn, be it from Go Again or from How From Beyond, if I do not throw out about at least 10 damage each turn, I might not be applying enough pressure. So my entire game plan was to really try to string together turns that really push as much damage as possible, even if it requires me to take more damage. Because in order for us to be, we don't have 1 hits. So as people say, the best hit is death. So the only way to reach that point is to trade our life resources and try to push as hard to bring them low enough to a point where they felt that they have to block this, or they might risk losing the game.
Mhm.
So as to dying to Blood Debt, in my Swiss round, the against Stavo, I've actually killed myself due to Blood Debt, and it was very unfortunate. So I actually drew. It wasn't a great hand, but I drew one Pulping and 3 Beast Withins. So yeah, it sounds very good, right? But
Yeah, most of
when
the
I
time, yeah, you want that.
yeah, so when I casted the Pulping and I drew a Blood Rush Battle from top and it got discarded. And then
Oh wow.
the Stavo just blocked
Oh
off the
God.
Pulping and then I just died to Blood Debt.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That
So
is definitely the worst
I guess
feeling.
it happens. I think one of the most important thing about playing Claws Levian is, yes, you guys are very familiar with it, is really to manage expectations. Sometimes this kind of low variance things just happens and then the low rolls just happen and there's nothing much you can do about it. Just accept it as part of the game plan and
It's a brute mechanic, right? The variance.
Yep. And something I definitely want to circle back to at the end as we talk to kind of the balance between, your ceiling versus like the low ceiling as well. I think Levia might be in a bit of a tough spot because of that. But next question here. If you could go back to that run, would you have changed anything about the list? Since, you took it from the YouTube, you didn't have much time to brew with it yourself. What would you have changed to make it fit how you want?
Yeah. After playing with the list for the entire day, generally I think it's a very well tuned list. I might have trimmed Talisman of Recompense, not because it's a bad card. I actually love that card, but I have never gotten a chance to play it. You
Meta's
just don't
really
really
fast.
see. Yeah, you don't really see any mid-range decks. And I would probably find a way to include Command and Conquer because we really need that hit. I think if we were to be able to throw that into a OTK Viscerai, things might be totally different because they like to arsenal either moderate type or Sonata, and if you can threaten their arsenal, it's very good. Yeah. So
for sure.
Mainly that is still what that's what I think we should change. I still don't believe in running defense reacts because it just hurts our gameplay.
Right.
Yeah. Imagine if you were to use Wild Ride or Popping Shadow of Plasmophet, and then you draw and discard defense react. Not only do you miss, you also telegraph to your opponents that you have one less defense react, and that might make them change their plays. So just all gas, no D reacts.
All gas, no brakes, as we say.
All gas.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I do have a more of a question for you. Like, we all know how Levias is such an underplayed hero. Do you feel like picking Levias was an advantage in your region, especially since not a lot of players have experience facing this class? And do you think the element of surprise helped you get to the top levels of your ProQuest?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that is actually one of the main reasons one would actually consider playing Levias into a big tournament. Usually, no one prepares for it. No one really has a dedicated sideboard plan against Levias. Usually, I guess our sideboard plan against us is Rhina's sideboard plan. People sideboard against us, they sideboard against Rhina. And I was surprised that I was able to push so much damage as well. The players around watching the games were very surprised that I was able to raise chains, which was amazing. And so a lot of comments I got throughout the tournament was like, wow, I can't believe you are able to push so much damage in such a short span of time. Yeah. So and the inexperience of whether to block or not block an attack also plays a part. So my top 8 games were like from what I read from LSS, the combined experience, like combined EXP of the top 8 was more than 8,000. Mind you, I account for 100 of that 8,000, so the rest was like 7,900. So they are very experienced players.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so but they've never really played against really knows what they do.
Exactly.
So most it is because it's such a high rolly deck, high variance. Not a lot of people try to play her competitively, and so no one actually prepares
Yeah.
for her. Yeah.
Well, I heard that you actually got your PTI as well from that event, even finishing in the finals. It got passed down to you. So big congratulations again on that run, and you really got our queen so close to victory. But speaking of getting close, we also have another Levia finalist in the room. We've got PH, who played his own hybrid list, landing in the finals, and another 2 top 8s. So how about you jump us into who you are and how you did?
So hi everybody, I'm PH. I come from Hong Kong, and I've actually played FAB for the same amount of time as you can see here. So it was end of Monarch and early into Tales of Aria, and the main reason why I played Levia was because my friend thought he didn't really like the artwork on Levia, and he just gave me all her cards, and I picked up the game and I started with Levia, and then I started tuning her in a way that I liked. So as we all know, there are 2 different builds for Levia. One is claws and the other one is clubs, right? So basically, I really like the idea of claws, and that it dishes out so much damage, and not many decks can actually throw that much damage compared to Levia, as all their cards are above value, which are way above 8, like such as Endless Maw coming in for 3 for 9 damage, even 6 and Go Again, Hungering Slaughter Beast for 2 costs and coming in for 7. So all these are above cost, and I really like the idea of it. But every time I played Blood Dead Claws, I would lose to myself. I would either not be able to beat decks like Katsu or Dorinthia, and I got really frustrated at that time. So I started thinking, hey, is there a way to actually minimize the variance and to actually make the deck a little more smoother by getting rid of more Blood Dead cards, and then just to be able to dish the same or reasonable amount of damage without hurting yourself. So I really like that idea, and I know, Ethan, you had that deck list for clubs, and then I looked at it. I was like, hey, this is actually a pretty good idea for an anti-meta kind of thing, right? So it kind of, the clubs build works really well into decks, maybe like, again, Dorinthia, Katsu, or even Starvo. It's a very defensive build, and it kind of plays into what I would say is it's kind of like Guardian, which is pretty unique. So again, by balancing both of the builds, it felt like, I could play like a Guardian and I could play like the Fruits. So that's why I kind of merged the decks together, and that's how the hybrid idea came too. And again, the meta right now is Starvo and Prism mainly, and maybe Viscerai. And all these decks get hurt a lot by losing hand. Especially, that's why I'm running 9 pummels in my decks, and that really just knocks them out of their boots by saying, you know what, I'm throwing a 6 attack at you, and then you guys either overblock me and lose your tempo, or otherwise I'm just gonna swing a pummel at you and take your hand for it. So that's how I made my decision on that. And a little bit more on the background. I think Hong Kong is quite competitive.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, the deck lists are going into a 35 or 34 person ProQuest. 60% of it is probably Starvos, and that's really crazy. And every top 8, most of them are either 8 Starvos, 7 Starvos, and 1 Prism. And I was lucky enough to be one of the only special rogue decks in there a couple of times. So again, I was really considering how I should counter these decks when building, and that's the end result, and that's why I brought hybrid to life in all these events.
Yeah. Well, can you speak a little bit to touch on how your runs went? Just tell the people how you ended up.
Yeah. So I played 5 ProQuests actually in Hong Kong, and then I made top 8s on 2 of them, and I made finals on one of them. So I'll talk about the top 8s first. I came into them, I think, in the preliminaries for one of them was 3-2, and that was right on the 8th spot. And the other one I was 4-1. And in the middle, I was playing a lot of decks like Prism, which I felt I was very comfortable with playing against. Especially when I was playing Prism, I would probably go into the Claws build, which could threaten them and push them. And other decks, maybe I ran into Bolton, Lexis, I went Claws as well. And against Starvo, I would switch gears to going into the club build, where it was more like a 50-50 instead of just Starvo high rolling you, because I was playing a lot of defense reactions. I had 6 immovables and 3 big sync blows, and that really held up the game until went to the end game, and we just kept trading. Right, it was a club into 4. He would give me 2 hand. He would swing into me. I would give him 2 hand until whoever basically can threaten with a pummel, or that's how I ended a lot of the games. Which and I wanted to touch a bit more on the finals, the match where the ProQuest where I went into finals. It was quite a unique top 8, because the first match I played was against a Dorinthia, and I felt it was a Dorinthia, and I felt really comfortable going into clubs build, because they really can't do anything. I could block everything, and by the end it was just like, swing clubs, they will block with 2, and then they will try something, and then I will block with 3. And I would choose 1 pitch, a club, and eventually he would dry out of his deck no matter what. So that was a really, really good win. And after that, I faced the first time, actually. I told Ethan before that no one would play Kano in the Hong Kong meta. I remember telling you that. And I did not have any sideboard ready for a Kano. So there was a Kano in top 4. And then I just went, I'm like, I don't have any Arcane Barrier. I told him straight up, I don't have any. But then I was able to push him out, because being able to use the Claws build with pummels, it really hurt them. They lose a hand, and they would take damage. They're already losing 10 health, and by just not blocking or not being able to block, I was able to overwhelm them over time. So and then in the finals, this is absolutely, just as Yin said, the most hated deck against for Levia right now, I think, is Viscerai.
Viscerai, so bad.
There's not much we can do. It's either we make the push before they get all their rune chants, 20 plus rune chants, try to push them, try to pummel them, try to break their sonatas with the CNC and the pummel combo. Otherwise, it's a sure loss. So I didn't even bring any AP into that match. In the end, I was like, whatever, just rush, try whatever. And that was pretty much how I ended up being second place instead of first.
Well, look, honestly, fantastic, because that hybrid build has inspired a lot of people, just merging 2 good ideas into a better idea, honestly. So props to you on that. But when you showed up, what matchup were you most afraid of with a build like this? And what were you most comfortable against? I think you kind of mentioned Dorinthia fell in that slot.
Yeah. Well, I actually was very afraid of Dorinthias and Katsus, because at first, because I didn't get a lot of practice against them, and then I thought, could my deck actually handle them if I played? I didn't get much practice against those, but in fact, after I switched to clubs on that build, it was very easy. And another deck I was actually afraid of was Viscerai. I was always afraid of Viscerai even before because one, I didn't have practice against it, and second, I just know the ability they can, both methods they play, either aggro or OTK. It was bad for Levia. It didn't matter. It was just how rune chance. It was just how overwhelming it is, and we can't really pitch out our hands to stop them, and to stop the arcane damage. And I was actually again most afraid of Viscerai, and I was very, very comfortable with playing against Prisms, because I know Prisms actually they already have a hard time playing against Brooks, and I know that there was a new build, the new Aura build for Prism, and I still felt pretty confident against it, unless obviously some bad dice rolls or we weren't able to clear the auras fast enough. And I knowing myself, I was trying to make the deck into an anti-meta deck, so I was actually quite comfortable against Prism and Starvo, and I know my deck could actually perform maybe at a 50-50 balance against Starvo, as long as it's not like a Awakening, Pulverize, Okano play that, what can any deck do, right? So if it's a high roll like that, take the game, have it.
sure.
But otherwise, yeah, I felt very comfortable about that, and that's why I changed it up before. The first ProQuest that I made top 8, I always running Fate for Scene, Sink the Lows 3 of each, and then just Red Unmovable. And then I felt that wasn't enough against Starboard. That's why my deck changed a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I'll add in yellow Unmovables too, because it helps with pitch and it helps block the big hits. So basically, the biggest threats in that deck are Crippling Crush and Oaken Node. As long as you can stop those main hits, then you know what, the game can keep going, and you can probably bring them to the late game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So speaking of Starvo, from what I've seen from the ProQuest results, Hong Kong players really love their Starvos. I've seen a ProQuest with the full top 8, just full of Starvos. Yeah.
Mm.
So, what is the playstyle or mindset that you've adopted going into the Starvo matchup? Because I think that's the one that most people are interested in. Yeah.
Right. So I think first we gotta, like, playing into Starvo, we gotta adjust our mindset a little bit. As I just said, if they high roll you, there's nothing you can do about it. So you know what, you gotta take it a little bit more casual first. That's my mindset going to Starvo. If they win, you know what, it's because the deck is just good. It's not your fault that you're losing. So again, if they do high roll you, then you know what, just take it. Okay. But going into Starvo, I know that there's a chance of us winning, even as a Levia deck, because again, there's not a lot of decks that can, you know, turbo switch like us by going into an aggro deck and switching gears into a defensive guardian. I don't think, like, there's a lot of decks that can go both ways, but it's definitely not aggro and defense. So that's my mindset against Starvo. I was like, you know what, just go guardian against a guardian, and let's see who can block more, and then who can outlast each other. And by the time we get to the end, where we're all playing with our blue pitches, and it's basically just swinging back and forth and seeing who gets a better hand, or if I can get an Intimidate package, or Convulsions to end the game, or even, I could Tunic and then, you know, swing clubs and then cheat in a little yellow or red pummel for that 1 or 2 health. That's basically how I felt like going into the start. You know, it was tough. It was definitely tough, but you know, it was played.
So would you say, when you're talking about Starvo, are you seeing more of that aggressive, like, casino style, or are you seeing the slower, like, heavy D-react? Because I know me personally, when they started going slower and running the defense reaction package, Club got a lot worse into it because it just stalled out, making the game to that point where you're saying, where it's later and you can set up intims and you can kind of just, like, abuse the fact that they're stuck on, like, 2-block blues. When they add their own defense reactions, they just wait out your good stuff as well, and your pummels, like, really hurt to land. So what are you seeing more, would you say?
Again, I think a lot of people don't understand the Levia game plan, right? So not a lot of people would sideboard in defense reactions. So I've played both before. Some players would actually sideboard in defense reaction, and I had a really hard time playing against that because
it's rough.
But some players would still keep the aggro build, hoping, you know, they can crush you with Crippling Crush and Open Hold, and they just kept going with that. But one main thing that really their game started switching up is them bringing in the new equipment, the Bastion of Ice and Lock, which really hurts our build. Okay, you know, because they're calculating, you know, they're reading a pummel play, and you know what, I'm just gonna block your first tip with the Ice and Lock. You take a Frostbite. What am I gonna do with the 2 extra cards in my hand now? So that really hurts, and that kind of developed later on to where I would be playing my pummels. I wouldn't do the pummel play unless I knew I had 2 blues in hand, knowing that I could, you know, pitch 2 blues and then swing in with attack action and still have enough pitch for the pummels. So again, people are adapting to the way I play because they see me play a couple of ProQuests and they're like,
Definitely.
oh wow, there's an underdog here, you know, and this deck actually works against them. So people are adapting, yeah, for sure.
Man, people should just keep giving you the win. Come on, man. Someone has to rocket Levia to the top. I want to see it happen in Hong Kong. That would be incredible.
First, you know.
Yeah. People are so competitive, man. But so how do you feel about this medium amount of blood debt that you run? Because I think it's similar to how I was first trying like the club builds really early on, where there was a medium amount of blood debt, but my entire strategy was just pitch it back to the bottom, try to concentrate it. Is that how you are playing the hybrid list? Or are you just kind of saying, you know what, like the stats are so good that if I take a trickle of blood debt playing it on curve, so be it. Like, how are you using that?
Well, you gotta understand the sideboard plan a little bit because I'm running 9 defense reactions, and basically what I do is when I'm playing the club build, I actually sideboard out a lot of blood debt cards.
Okay.
So all I'm keeping is maybe the Hungering Slaughter piece and Endless Maw, and I side out the Boneyard and the Dread Screamers. The reason why I keep the former is because they're above value. So if we just do a little bit of simple math, normally a CNC is presenting 6 damage. With a red pummel, it's doing 10 damage, which is a good enough game, right?
Oh yeah.
So with Hungering Slaughter Beast and a yellow, it also presents 10. Even a Swing Fig, which is presenting 8, and a blue pummel, it's presenting 10. So basically, Levia actually fixes that balance of the value of the pummels. So that's why it works with the rainbow pummels. Okay, and being able to run the blood debt build, I think I put more blood debt cards when playing the boss side because you always want to overpower your opponent because as I said before, I play the game a lot by thinking about each card's value. Endless Maw actually, if you banish a 6, it presents a value of 10. A Hungering Slaughter Beast presents 9, a normal 6, CNC it presents 8 as well. So being always above curve actually kind of fixes the issue a little bit of Starvo gaining 3+2 each turn and dominate. You know what? We gotta play something that pushes over that regular damage.
Yep.
And that's where some of the blood debt cards come from and have to be kept. So that's my sense on playing blood debt a little bit. And with my build, I actually don't feel as pressure because most of the time I would be either, if it's early, I see blood debt cards, I would probably pitch a red, a blue swing with attack action, get rid of that. And I would start blocking with a lot of 6s that don't have blood debt. You know what? It can turn on your blood debt effects, but you won't have the pressure of, I banished some cards that it's going to hurt me later on. So that's how I play it. And as you just mentioned, it's okay to take maybe 1 or 2 pings of blood debt. And by not playing Carrion Husk, that's one major thing is we don't always have that 1 blood debt, the early ticking of that 1 blood debt from early game. Just making yourself think, you know what, I have to block the Carrion Husk. And that actually helped a lot. So the Tunic play was the way to go.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, Tunic feels insane. Yeah. All right, wrap us up, YZ. Last question.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned that you were unprepared for Kano. Were there any other matchups that little to preparations, primarily and did you manage to meet any of those decks in the ProQuest?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Dorinthia and Kano are definitely the 2 that I very little practice against. Kano for sure. I have never actually played one in CCN. It was the first time.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate that I was able to, force everything out and dish enough damage to close the game on him. Another deck that I played very little against was actually OTK Viscerai before ProQuest. I have a practice buddy which actually plays aggro Viscerai, but he doesn't play OTK. So I was actually tuning my deck and how I actually play against Viscerai during each ProQuest and each Viscerai matchup I met. And even up to date, I played I think 3 or 4 games against OTK Viscerai, and I was only able to win one of them because I was able to keep their temple in check by pummeling them or with CNC and pummels. But otherwise, I think it's definitely a tough matchup and definitely the worst to play against for sure.
Yeah, well, it's weird because in the Viscerai circles, they actually say into Levia. Well, the ones who are compiling all their data, you're supposed to play the aggro plan into Levia, not the OTK plan. But that's only the Viscerai players in the know. So at a ProQuest, I'll play against Viscerai, and it's a hard call because you're like, well, they should be on aggro, but they're probably going to play OTK, and it really. No, you can't guess. So, it's interesting because when they honestly both are bad matchups, so it doesn't super matter in the end. But it can affect some sideboarding. But sweet, You are honestly the Levia king over there in Hong Kong for sure. Everyone loves you. So thanks for your share of the deck list and your run there. But I think we'll pivot to the last list here in just pure club. And you all know me well enough, so no need for the heavy introduction. But actually, surprising, we all started playing in around that same time, like end of Monarch area. So that's where I guess everyone was just falling in love. It was the season to just fall in love for Levia. So sure enough, all been playing around the same time then. And when I really picked her up, the attraction was mostly just because I opened Doomsday in my first box. I was like, okay, well, that's a legendary, gotta play her. And as I started playing her more and more, this whole blood debt mechanic felt like it put a lot of pressure on you to play perfectly. Like you had to just get good quickly while playing this deck because you were playing with an extra lose condition. So I feel like sticking with Levia for so long, so early, actually helped me kind of catch up with all these other players who've been playing for much longer, just because you need to tighten up your play. You need to shore up your weaknesses to make sure that your only lose condition is yourself and not your opponent. If you're doing everything right, then your opponent's not going to make you lose. It's what you're doing. So that was kind of why I fell in love with her. But playing this kind of go ham claws nonstop for like the past two metas, seeing that there were just better aggro decks out there in Chain and then Briar, made me realize, well, maybe just being an aggro deck isn't her right identity. There might be like another way to play her. And I've always been a fan of like mid-rangey play styles. Like my backup decks tend to be Guardian or something like that. Because this whole idea of like playing for second cycle, actually wanting to block and optimizing hands when you trade down some cards, keep some cards, you're playing weapons sometimes. All that feels like it opens up a lot of different play lines, and it feels really good to play well. Feels like you made a lot of right decisions in games like that. And I also think my area just doesn't play for the long game very well yet, because a lot of us started around Monarch, so everyone's just playing aggro stuff or stuff to counter aggro, which would be like, Ranger. And so I feel like kind of the slower play style is not something a lot of people have clued up, have a clue to play like perfectly yet. So I wanted to get ahead of the gun on that, and so I took Levia into that realm and played her with this club build at just like a win-a-box one day, and it performed like really well. I was really surprised that it was just almost unbeatable. It felt like back then. This was pre-Everfest still, so the meta was like a lot of Briar, and you could actually fatigue out a Briar. You could beat the decks that were trying to just block out the Briar because you were a pummel deck like on top. It felt really good. So that was kind of like the initial build way back pre-Everfest. But then when Everfest came out, it felt like the aggressive slant of Levia didn't necessarily get too many tools, whereas Club really did. Like Swing Big was perfect for that deck. Just another 2-cost attack that's overrate, that is pummelable. I mean, that was like the big winner, the big incentive to keep playing Club. So that's why I really put more time into it and wanted to play that, and took it right away to that first SEG tournament, and ended up at 4-2, which, I mean, that was a great showing, honestly, for a deck that I just like YOLO'd into that field, because I didn't really know how it'd be into Starvo. I knew it'd be bad in Visceride. Sure enough, it was bad in Visceride, but it was beating those early Starvos because they were playing super hard aggro. Any kind of hand disruption just ruined them, and their builds were like even more fragile back then because they'd be playing like Art Awards and stuff. So you could really punish those builds. So it felt good. But then even jumping into the ProQuest season, it felt like the refinement of these decks was just really getting there. Like Prism became this crazy 27 aura deck. Like everyone's running like the same game plan on that. Starvos became like either this super tuned aggro version or the more defensive like Kielmakreath version. And everyone was just kind of copying these lists. And it felt like the lists were getting really refined, and Club was having a harder time beating them. But I wanted to play it anyway. I did have to sync to playing Starvo to get my PTI, but then I came back to our girl and brought her to 2 top 8s back to back. Feel pretty good about the first one. The first one was at a 61 person ProQuest out here in Michigan, and I went X1, 5-1, six rounds, right? Went 5-1, no buys or anything. So that felt great because like it was a huge field. Really good players out there. My matchups were a bit skewed. Like I played against a Viserai, which I beat because he just popped off too early. Beat 3 chains, lost to 1 chain, and then beat a Rhinar. So I didn't see any Prisms, didn't see any Starvos until the top 8, and then immediately got knocked out by a Prism after gamblers just like refused to cooperate. Because with the club, that's kind of how you have to play that matchup. You don't have the luxury of playing it like PH does, where you can be more aggressive. Club is just always more defensive, lacking in more of the go again and pressure. So against Prism, you do have to be more of a Scabskins deck, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it didn't work that day. But then right after, I took Club again to a top 8 at a smaller PQ. I think it was like 28 players. But once again, going 4-1. So it's not like I was, on the bubble ever, which felt good. But immediately got knocked out in top 8 again. This time by a Starvo. And this Starvo played 4 Oakenolds against me. That Pulse of Candlehold does put one back on top of the deck. And it was just a long, grindy game. It did get to like the beginning of second cycle. I did block out like a 15 attack Oakenold that he had pulsed. I mean, still couldn't win though, because he did go the defensive route. And so my threats just never actually landed. He would easily take an off turn to avoid a pummel and all this. So couldn't pull it out, couldn't grind there. So that was it. 2 top 8s for club, but the deck could do it. So I feel like I had my fun. Couldn't get the win. Couldn't even get second like you all. But really enjoyed wrapping up the ProQuest season with her for sure.
So Ethan, I recall you and I were actually theory crafting prior to your SUD Philly a bit, and that's like when we actually started talking before the first big Starvo event. Do you think the meta has evolved a lot since then? And were you more confident to play the club build at that time or into the current now? And how has that affected your Levia playstyle up to now?
I think the club build tends to be a pretty good early days build, I feel, because it punishes very greedy lists. It punishes lists that just aren't refined yet, that don't have like the players behind them that really know how to efficiently pilot their decks yet. When the pilot is making like resource errors and not weighing up the power of all their cards, then all of a sudden something like club that actually just straight removes the value of their cards in like pummel or like pummeling a CNC and just like hitting these like reset moments in the game, you get a lot of a bigger lead doing those kinds of plays. But as the players get better, as the decks get more refined, there's nothing new to just being like a weapon deck. It's how Bravo plays a lot, or old Bravo plays quite a bit. And so people kind of get, keen on what you're doing. And if they really think a pummel would like lose them the game, then they'll just start to overblock and actually not feel so bad about doing it because they know their deck's strength. And, if they need to lose a hand to protect their arsenal piece, like they'll do it. So it definitely feels worse into the later meta for sure, especially into the new slow Starvo. Like if one of the reasons to run club was to beat Starvo, if your opponent's on slow Starvo, it's like almost impossible. So it's not feeling as great anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, so Ethan, I see that you're running these rounds on me in your list.
Yeah.
It's a very divisive card, I guess. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it because it kind of gives your opponent an additional card that means the goal,
Mm-hmm.
So how has that card performed for the entire time?
Yeah, well, honestly, my whole reason to try that card is because I kind of trust the LSS devs. Sometimes they get it wrong, but just seeing that off of a blue, you could play this rounds on me into a club swing. It feels like there's something behind that cost curve that's gotta be good. So it was more of an experiment than anything. And I think like 90% of the time it was just a card you blocked with or pitched because it's a blue block 3, which is fine. But funny enough, in that 61 player tournament, I played against 4 chains and I was just on pure fatigue strat against them. And this rounds on me was like actually kind of really good there. Like, especially if I could go first and I played a this rounds on me and then followed up with some swing. They tend to just like block because they're not quite sure I'm fatiguing them yet. And then, the draw card meant nothing and they're just -1 for a turn. But even, sometimes in the mid game, like playing a this rounds on me would just shore up breakpoints. And, there's only so many defense reactions in your deck, and you're all about just not leaking damage. And a chain can only get so much go again in a turn. So, yeah, it felt pretty fine for that. It also felt really good against Prism, and Katsu, which I also played across the tournaments. So, yeah, I'd say in like half the matchups I played, it was actually a good card, but my matchups were kind of skewed with how many chains I played. But overall, like, it just doesn't need to be there. I was just experimenting in hoping that, the whole like pay for this round, pay for club meant something more. I don't think it really did, but it was cool. It was a cool card. No one expected it.
So I actually want to try that next time too. This round's on me. Maybe I'll try it against Prisms or Chains, as you said. But Ethan, being the pioneer of Levia deck building, what do you feel the deck is really lacking right now, or is the meta just too overwhelming for us, or what? Is there one big card that we could use to bring back the queen?
Oh, well, unfortunately, there's a really easy answer for this, and that's the deck just like doesn't have the ceiling that any of the best decks have right now. Like at your most unfair, you are pummeling a CNC. That's like the most unfair thing you can do. Or like late game stacking barraging, but that takes a long time to get to, right? It's like the most unfair thing you can do. And yet you're looking at decks like Prism that can double aura you like immediately or like every turn from then on. You're looking at Viserai who can like OTK on like turn 3 if he's got the nuts. Or Starvo who can just Oakenhold you 4 times, triple fuse. Those ceilings are insane. Like nothing like we've even seen before. Just because the variance in those decks just like not even low variance rather. I mean like they're high variance. Like what they can hit right at the top is just crazy. Akin to like a Claws of Levia just having like 3 perfect Blood Rush turns in a row. But like that's way more unlikely because that's drawn out across 3 turns than like how Prism, Starvo, Viserai can do it because they can string these things together not dependent on just like the one card like we would be with Blood Rush. So yeah, club just doesn't have that high ceiling, and even pummeling a CNC right now doesn't feel as amazing against the top decks because like a Prism can just have an instant in her arsenal, just that comes right out, or like the Starvo just playing Crown of Seeds. So it's really like just Viserai that your unfair play feels unfair at all. So that's kind of the big problem. If there was a new card that she could get, I really want to see something more for not even Club Levia, because I don't think that's how she's meant to be played, but really like Blood Debt Levia needs like a payoff for her Blood Debt cards. Been saying this for a while, but like, why is there no Hexagore build yet? That's the kind of theme that Levia should have, and she's building up her Blood Debt for a reason. But right now it's just for Hexagore, it's just for Doomsday. That doesn't feel good enough at all. And I really just want to see more in that space because, if our Blood Debt has like even just one huge payoff card, then our problems probably get solved and we can go back to playing like the truly fun version of Levia that's not just like strictly anti-meta. Although, I mean, she definitely has results now working in that space, but I'd like to go back to Claws.
That's good to hear. So on that note, would you make any changes to your current club list if you want to run it again in ProQuest, or maybe gravitate towards some sort more of a hybrid build like SPH?
Yeah, if I was gonna play club again, it'd be either faster in some other capacity or just closer to how PH is running it, where like, because I'm running Claws as well, but it's really just for Prism. I'm not even running the Blood Rush, so just kind of like adding back the Blood Rush, adding back some more blooded attackers to bring it more into that hybrid space would probably be just like, yeah, just better to run right now. So yeah, definitely we'll give that a go. I don't know about 9 pummels though. It's a lot of 2 blocks, but I'd try something in that vein. But sweet, that was great discussion, everybody. Thanks for sharing. So now that we've covered the 3 builds, we put them out there. Sorry, Hexagore fans, there isn't quite the build out there for you yet. I want to open this up to what we're thinking about looking for prepping for these bigger tournaments coming up. Obviously, like Indie's really close, but there's the Pro Tour this year, and with that Pro Tour, there's not going to be a new set yet, unless the Rhinar Classic Battles does anything for us, which I doubt. But there might be a ban list in April, right? So that pretty much means the best build for Levia that we can build is out there like right now. The cards are out on the table. We can theory craft it. I have faith in us. But do we really think she has legs for someone who wants to put in the practice now, take her to a tournament like the Pro Tour? Can she really be the correct deck in this meta? Nirvash, what do you think?
Well, I think, as I said, if overall our builds are put together and we use the hybrid build as a base for the Pro Tour, I think the hybrid has a decent amount of wins for against Prism and against Starvo, but the losing factor is still Viserai. So no matter what, something has to be fixed because I think LSS made a little too much gave a Starvo a little bit too much and gave Rune Blades always a little bit too much. Rune Blades just have Rosetta Thorn, even their two new Majestics, Revel and Blade, Blood, and Swarming.
0 for 5s. 0 for 5s.
0 for 5. They're amazing cards. Like Swing Big is a good card. But those cards are amazing. So, is there a way that they can tune it out a bit to make sure other decks have a chance? I think that is the major issue for us right now. And again, Levia right now, the way I'm playing it, or even we're trying to play it right now, is just an anti-meta build. It's not really a meta build, so it's going to take more cards for our Brute Lady to bring the game a little bit more top notch. I think, yeah.
No, definitely agree. It's really the Viserai problem, like you said. That deck is just really, really rough for Levia. Like the whole issue that you have, right, is even when they're playing aggro and they're just putting out this crazy amount of damage, the way you have to try to beat that ever is just committing to your own off turns to say they built up rune chance, then I'm taking an off turn to try to deny the damage, be efficient with the pitch, yada yada. Claws just can never play that way because as soon as you're committed to aggression, you just can't have those off turns, right? But then Club is just too slow of a deck that they're just going to go OTK into you and you just can't really beat that anyway. So it's like Viserai is really, that's the elephant in the room for Levia. That matchup is so bad, and the only times you really beat it are if your opponent is just not playing it well, because a good player on Viserai should always stop you. And that's my big fear. I think the good players know how strong Viserai is. He's obviously been a strong player in the ProQuest, not to the same degree as Prism and Starvo, but if Prism's kind of the new queen that she's been in this uptick on the last ProQuest runs here, Viserai is supposedly kind of the better deck of the top 3 to play into Prism. So if there's more of him, I don't want to play Levia.
Less of us. So yeah, I just want to add a little bit more on the Viserai matchup because in my finals in the top 2 when I was playing against Viserai and I was going second. And as we all know, Levia has a really big issue is she can't really do much first turn going first. She can only the arsenal pass. But the Viserai going first, basically he made 8 rune chance on his first turn. So basically he gained a full turn of 8 rune chance onto a Levia. So and on my turn I had a handful of blood deck cards, which can't even be used because he didn't swing anything. He couldn't have no graveyard, no nothing. So all I could do was, roll my Scabskins, hope for 2 action points, claw, and that was it for 6 damage. And he already has 8 rune chance before you. So it's just terrible. It feels very crummy, and yeah, Viserai is just terrible. Our hate is building up.
Oh, it is. Well, what do you think, YZ? Because you were playing the claws build here. Can you just aggressively tear down the Viserai, you think?
So my mindset into Viserai was hard race. I didn't even take any arcane barrier. Because you have no opportunity to actually pitch away cards to prevent arcane damage. Because if you pitch for arcane barrier, you're gonna die to blood deck. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, the games the finals similar to PH. My opponent made, I think, a bit lesser. He made 6 rune chance in the first turn. Still was enough to pop off at turn 3. And yeah, so I do have to note that Claws is very dependent on Blood Rush Bellows. If you don't see it early, there is really no chance of winning. To be very honest, I've had a game against the OTK Viserai in the Swiss where I drew 3 Out of Wars, and I did Out of Wars back to back against him like 3 times, but didn't see Blood Rush, and he still killed me. As long as you don't see Blood Rush, you are not presenting nearly enough threat for them to even think about blocking you off.
Yeah, and Blood Rush has this problem too, where like you're saying, if you don't see it in that early game, you do have to keep at least 3 cards for it, and you normally, you should have that arsenal set up as well. And so when you see it like in that mid game, late game, it's just not even good enough anymore because you have no choice in whether or not you can take their damage or not. If the life's too tight, then you just don't necessarily get to keep the cards you want for a Blood Rush. So it's really dependent. You have to draw it so early. And then it's almost like a chain effect, because if you draw the Art of Wars, the Blood Rushes, they're drawing you hopefully closer into your next one. So the disparity between a game where you start off with one versus never see one, it's so bad. That's the variance more than anything. It's not Scab Skins, it's like the Blood Rush draw, I think.
Yeah, but I would also like to add on that the current Levias list is not as punishing on the first 2 turns as the whole list. Current list really has a lot more going for it, a lot more cards that don't require you to banish 3, and I think that is a move in the correct direction, because I think by now, even if it's not an OTK restriction, most players at the very least knows that turn 1 or turn 2, you just don't attack into a Levias. And then in the past, she wouldn't have much to do except to maybe roll Scab Skins, claws. But with the current build, this is a lot less likely to happen. And the magic number I've always said, Blood Rush is 1. You only need 1 card in your graveyard, and you can do a 18 damage claws turn. And that is that's very important. So usually, as long as you are able to put the first or second card into the grave, your engine can start to move off.
So then this round's on me and Claws Levia. Cycling a card. Sounded pretty good.
Drawing, filtering faster would help.
It actually could. I think if there's a way, I haven't been able to do it yet, but a card like even bigger than this, just that opt effect to be aggressively digging towards your power cards for a deck like Levia could be quite good. But I've tried it and it has not felt like it fits in the deck for me. So
I thought that Yazi is very big on bigger than that on right? He's a very good player, very experienced.
He's onto something there. I think it's just like with Levias, it's just an extra dead card. But maybe we do have to commit more to the opt effects, the digging, and just find that first Blood Rush, like you said. But I do want to touch on as well. When we look at how much damage a deck like Viserai can do, or even Starvo, and the fact that they have no downside, and yet Levia has the Blood Debt downside, do you think that we're just like forever in this second tier of hero because we're already seeing the creep of damage not have a downside, whereas we do, and we're really only overstated in either like 1 attack point or by like undercosted by 1 pitch or 1 extra keyword, and yet we have to deal with this whole self-kill effect, whereas like a 0 for 5 almost no deck has should have access to, but then Viserai gets 2 of them and he's got no downside. Like, does that scare you guys?
It scares me a lot because I think it goes a little bit into the development into the game as well by giving heroes too much for free. So basically, Starvo gets too much for free. There's no cost. Basically, it's a free +2 value onto a card, and it gains not only the +2, it gains Go Again and it gains Dominates. That is a very, very big. For example, even heroes like Chain gaining Go Again for free, basically, and him being able to use Banish cards much better than we do is a very different play. While it's similar to what I say sometimes. I'm playing Levias like it's a blank slate. I'm not even using her hero power at most times. So it feels kind of bad. I like the cards that it gives, but you know what? Her hero power is much lower compared to the new heroes or even some of the existing top tier heroes.
Yeah, there's always people who haven't played against Levias and they read her and they're like, that's all she does? Like, yeah,
That's all she does.
that's all she does. Sorry,
Yeah.
I can't impress
I
you more
mean-
than that.
So
Like,
for I guess Levia is like, I guess she's the only one hero where her ability is to manage downsides more than an upside.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, that's correct.
That says a lot. It's just an uphill battle most of the time, and yes, like what PH says, is as good as a blank slate. And
Yeah.
so breakpoints, while good, they aren't in this current meta aren't nearly enough to threaten like a block from very aggressive decks.
Mhm.
So if you look at Starvo, Viserai, and even Prison, they do have a form of on-hit, right, which kind of incentivizes to block them off. Not for Levia. I think the strategy against Levia, most of the time, if you have a more aggressive deck, is to not just block, to just not block her and then just keep throwing
Yep.
attacks.
Yep. There's always, especially playing in my local area, people have clued on to the playstyle as well, where you hit that threshold of I have like 10 blood debt and I'm at 10 life, and they can either commit right then and there to, all right, this is it, like full aggression, or just keep blocking out until you die to blood debt. And before, I think most people were blocking more. They were like, oh, well, she's going to die to blood debt, so I'll just, keep blocking. But you don't really die to blood debt when you're in full control of your full hand and your graveyard and your banner stone. So she was a lot stronger when that's how people played. But now when they see that you're at 10 life and 10 blood debt, they just still play aggro into you. and that's worse. Like, you're just gonna die from anything at that point, because when they take cards out of your hand, then you don't get it as good at managing your blood debt, and then you can die from it, right? So,
And especially for claws, right? At most, you can only block with 2 cards because you need to pitch one, play one, assuming no arsenal.
mhm.
So essentially, what's gonna happen is that they just need to find any attacks that go more than 6 breakpoints, 7 breakpoints at most, and then you will always be leaking damage. And
Mhm.
that just sucks in the tournament.
you always need the 2 cards to solve the blood debt issue. So, I mean, if we had a better equipment or something that could help out in these emergency cases, then it would help a lot. Because remember how we used to play against the old Bravo was, we always had to set a energy potion
Mhm.
and then keep blood debt card in our arsenal, just to solve that issue again. So, I mean, if LSS does something, I think would benefit our queen a little bit more.
I really am hoping so. I know there's a lot of Levia love within the company, but we're not seeing it in these sets yet. So I'm just, fingers crossed that we start seeing that love trickle through, because it's coming. I really hope we get that reward. But so last question, let's wrap it up here. If we discard our bias towards our lovely Shadow Queen, I want you both to give me the main reason you would consider her for these tournaments, right? That main reason why you take her in the first place. XNirvash, what you got?
Well, I personally, I don't like playing meta decks. I always like to try and break the meta. So, and again, even if I weren't playing Levia, I was playing, for example, a deck like Azalea, I would consider a way to play her into the meta.
Mhm.
But Levia actually does this best, as I mentioned before, especially in the hybrid build where it can go both ways. And I think it's the main reason I would consider her for higher tier tournaments. Being able to go aggressive and defensive is a very, very key thing. Compared to like Oldhim, which can play very defensive, but he can't play offensive. You know what I mean? Compared to Levia, where I'll just bring in Claws build. I'll just bring Clubs build for going defensive. So that's the main reason I would bring her for higher tier tournaments. And people to actually want to consider trying tournaments in a way where I'm not just playing an aggro deck the whole time. I'm not playing a defensive deck the whole time. You get to experience both of them work.
Yeah, very skill testing too when you play it like that. Pivoting is harder than just different cards in your list. It's mentality change, like playstyle change for sure.
Yeah.
All right, YZ, how about you?
Well, the main reason would be that no one is prepared to see Levia in a tournament. In Singapore has very aggressive meta. Everyone is prepared for Kano, even in CC. we always have at least AB3 most of the time. And it's just from that random Kano that will just pop up and just kill us. But no one ever has special sideboard tech against Levia. No one practices against a Levia. Even if within my playgroup, if I were to do playtests for tournaments, I usually don't play Levia because no one wants to practice against Levia. That other than realistically facing me in the tournament, don't think we have a few Singaporean players who are very big into Brutes and Levia, but in general, just you are not gonna meet a Levia in the tournament, and that actually works to our advantage because if people do not know how to play against her, there is more chance of them making mistakes, and then we can capitalize on those mistakes to go for the win. Because I mean, to be very honest, for Levia, you really got to know your plays. You really got to be very tight in the game, and then it's just a matter of you playing tightly, hoping that the opponent does not play as tight because they are just not familiar with playing against Levia. I think that is the main advantage of Levia, and
yeah, super true. Great. Well, I think my answer would actually kind of be in between both of yours, because the reason I like to play Levia is because not just that people aren't familiar against her, not just that you can pivot builds, but because no one is following what the builds are. No one cares. So
it's always changing.
And she's very much like a hero who's evolving, because her perfect list is still not quite out there yet. We're getting close, I think. But because no one's following what's going on, they see a card like this round's on me and they think you're memeing. Like they don't know there's a real strategy behind this thing. Or they see you on club and they're like, oh, this person sucks. Like they should have played Reinhardt. Like, there's so many emotions you go through as the opponent when you see Levia. Like it's just like disrespect, and then you kind of like, oh, they're doing something, and then you're just completely like in despair because you lose to the Levia. And I hear comments all the time where people are like, well, if they beat me or something, they're like, well, it would have been really embarrassing if I lost to Levia. And I'm like, ask the last 5 people I played. Like it happens, damn it, I promise. So that's the main reason. No one follows her quite like us cultists do, and so we'll hopefully be able to use that to our advantage. Yeah, but honestly, this was a great discussion, guys. Thank you so much. Now, I don't know if I've been convinced to play Levia at Indy. I'm still on the fence because I do really want to do well, and Levia in a long tournament can have some issues. But still really appreciate the conversation here. So any last shout outs for either of you? How about start with UPH?
Well, thank you, Ethan, for inviting us aboard on this chat. And you know what, our team, the League of Levias, will keep theory crafting together. We'll keep thinking of ways to play this Levia build. I mean, Ethan and I, we've been working a lot together, and Zordon has been YZ has giving us a lot of feedback on each of our deck lists, and it just keeps evolving. So you know what, guys, stay tuned. Keep watching Mansant's YouTube channel, and then you know what, we'll give you our answers here.
Sweet, YZ, thank you.
Yeah. So big shout out to Ethan. Thanks for having us on the channel. Yeah, I've actually picked up Levia mainly because of you. It was a budget list when I was starting out. You had the budget alternatives for. That was got me into at the start. Yeah. I would also like to thank my local game shops, Games Heaven, and Juke's Kingdom. So as well as Fender Hobby for hosting. Over here in Singapore, COVID situation hasn't been the best. There's a lot of safe distancing measures. So to be able to just go to a local game store to just play is already a reward in itself.
Exactly. We all want to play in the flesh and blood, right? So with that, I hope I even get to meet you guys one day. YZ, I know you were close to coming to New Jersey. Maybe it'll still happen. Hope so. Well, with that, we're going to drop all of the deck lists. They're all on Fab TCG right now, so I'll just drop all those links in the description below so you can see the 3 different ways Levias is being played right now, and perhaps a 4th way coming, maybe debuted at Indie. We'll see. But with that, honestly, thanks everyone for tuning in. This has been the League of Levias, signing out.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Later, guys.